The wind came down from the northern peaks like a living thing, howling through the narrow glen, shaking the pine trees until their branches groaned under the weight of ice. The sky was the color of iron, heavy with the promise of snow that would not stop once it started. Winter in the Scottish Highlands was always brutal, but this year, this cursed, starving year, it had arrived early and with a vengeance that felt personal. The cabin stood alone at the edge of Glen Morwen's territory, its stone walls dark with moisture, its thatched roof sagging in the middle like a broken spine. Smoke no longer rose from the chimney. Inside, the fire had burned down to embers, casting barely enough light to see by, and outside, in the snow, knelt Isla. Her wrists were raw and bleeding beneath the iron chains. The metal was old, rusted in places, but still strong enough to hold a child. Her mother had fastened them herself, carefully, methodically, the way she might tie down an animal for slaughter. She had not looked at Isla's face while she did it, had not spoken a single word, just the scrape of metal against metal, the click of the lock, and then the soft thud of the cabin door closing. Isla was 11 years old. She had stopped shivering an hour ago. That was when she knew the cold had won. Her breath came shallow now, misting in the air, each exhale weaker than the last. Her fingers had gone numb. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. The thin wool dress she wore, the only one she owned, was soaked through, clinging to her small frame like a second skin made of ice. She did not cry. Crying had never helped. The Glen Morwen pack had always been small, no more than 60 souls, most of them related by blood or bond. They lived in the shadow of Ben Alder, tucked into a narrow valley where the mist never fully lifted, and the sun was a rare and fleeting guest. They were shepherds, hunters, and survivors, proud people, hard people, the kind who measured worth in strength and contribution, who had no patience for weakness or bad omens. And Isla had been marked as both since the moment she was born. She had come into the world under a blood moon, pale and silent, her eyes too dark, her wolf absent. The midwife had whispered to her mother that something was wrong, that the child felt empty, hollowed out. And then, 1 week later, Isla's father had been found in the forest, his throat torn out by a rogue wolf, his body cold and stiff in the snow. Her mother had screamed for 3 days. 2 winters after that, her younger brother was stillborn, blue and silent in the midwife's hands. The crops failed that same year. A sickness swept through the pack, taking the old and the young alike. The river froze solid for the first time in living memory. The deer stopped coming down from the high ridges. The stores ran empty, and every loss, every tragedy, every cold grave dug into the frozen earth, they all pointed back to the same source. Isla, the cursed daughter, the bad omen made flesh. At first her mother had tried to defend her, had held her close and whispered that it wasn't her fault, that the goddess worked in ways no one could understand. But grief is a slow poison, and blame is easier than helplessness. The other mothers whispered when Katrina passed. The elders looked at her with pity and judgment in equal measure, and slowly, over the years, her mother's love had curdled into something else: resentment, fear, shame. Now, her mother no longer looked at her, no longer spoke her name, and tonight, she had done what the pack had been whispering she should do all along. She had removed the burden. Isla pulled her knees tighter to her chest, trying to hold on to what little warmth remained. The wind cut through her like a blade. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the tree line, she heard movement, the soft crunch of snow under heavy paws, the low rumble of breath that was too deep, too deliberate to be anything natural. The pack had stories about what lived in these mountains, things older than the clans, things that did not follow the goddess's laws. They called it Embaste Dorcha, the dark beast, a wolf larger than any alpha, with fur black as a moonless night, and eyes that burned like molten gold. The elders said it had no pack, no name, no history, that it had lived in these peaks for generations, unchanging, unkillable, that it took the lost, the abandoned, the unwanted, and that no one who went to it ever returned. Isla had always thought it was just a story, a warning to keep children from wandering too far into the woods. But now, as the footsteps grew closer, slow and deliberate, she wasn't so sure. She closed her eyes. Let it come. Let it be over. She was so tired of being afraid. Before we continue this journey into one of Scotland's darkest and most emotional stories of fate and rebirth, I need to ask you something. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. And if this is your first time on our channel, subscribe now, because what you're about to hear is a story that legends tried to hide, but memory refused to forget. The cold crept deeper into her bones. Her heartbeat slowed. She thought distantly that this must be what dying felt like. Not violent, not sudden, but soft, quiet, a slow fading into nothing. She thought of her mother's hands, the way they used to braid her hair when she was small, before everything changed, the way they had trembled tonight as they locked the chains. She thought of the pack children, who had thrown stones at her and called her witch-born, cursed, unclean. She thought of Elder Murdoch, who had stood in the center of the village 3 months ago and declared in front of everyone, "Some are born marked by darkness. The goddess shows us what must be cut away before it poisons the whole." No one had disagreed. Her lips were numb now. She could no longer feel her fingers gripping her knees. Her breath was barely missed. And then, footsteps. Not human. Heavy. Slow. Deliberate. The sound of claws scraping against stone. Isla's eyes fluttered open. Through the veil of falling snow, a shape emerged from the tree line. It was massive, far larger than any wolf she had ever seen, taller at the shoulder than a grown man. Its fur was pitch black, so dark it seemed to absorb the light around it, and its eyes glowed like embers pulled fresh from a forge. Steam rose from its breath in thick clouds. Its shoulders were broad and scarred, its claws long and pale against the snow. Mbase Dorcha, the dark beast. Isla's heart hammered weakly in her chest. She wanted to scream, to pull against the chains, to run, but her body wouldn't obey. She could only watch as the creature stepped closer, each footfall deliberate, measured, as if it were approaching something sacred. It stopped 3 paces away, and then, slowly, impossibly, it lowered itself to the ground. Its great head bowed. Its molten eyes never left hers. Isla stared, her breath caught in her throat, her mind struggling to make sense of what she was seeing. The beast did not growl, did not bare its teeth, did not advance. It simply knelt, as if in recognition, as if in reverence. Her lips parted, her voice barely a rasp. "What? Are you?" The beast's ears flicked forward, alert. Its gaze was ancient, knowing, filled with something that looked almost like sorrow. And then it moved. It rose slowly, carefully, and stepped forward until it stood directly in front of her. Up close, it was even more massive, its head level with hers even though she was kneeling. She could smell it now, pine and smoke and earth, and something deeper, something wild and untamed that made her wolf, the one she'd been told didn't exist, stir faintly inside her chest. The beast lowered its head to the chains at her wrists. Isla's breath hitched. Its jaws opened, revealing teeth like daggers, and for one terrifying moment, she thought it was going to tear her apart. But instead, it clamped down gently on the iron. The metal groaned, twisted, and then, with a sharp crack that echoed through the glen, it snapped. Isla gasped as the chains fell away, clattering into the snow. Her wrists were free. The beast stepped back, watching her with those burning gold eyes, waiting. Isla stared at her hands, raw and bloodied, and then back at the creature. "Why?" she whispered. The beast didn't answer. It simply turned its great head toward the forest, toward the unknown depths beyond the pack's territory. And then it looked back at her, waiting, offering. Isla looked over her shoulder at the cabin. Dark, silent, a place that had never been a home. She looked at the village beyond, where the people who had called her cursed slept warm in their beds. And then she looked at the beast, at the only thing in her entire life that had ever chosen her. She didn't know what it was, didn't know if it would kill her or save her, but staying here, that was a death she knew for certain. So she stood. Her legs shook. Her body screamed in protest. But she stood, and when the beast turned and began walking into the forest, Isla followed. Morning came slowly to Glen Morwen, the way it always did in winter, a grudging shift from black to gray, the sun hidden behind thick clouds that promised more snow. The village stirred late, reluctant to leave the warmth of fires and furs. Katrina Ross woke in the dark, alone in the cabin that had once held 3, and now held only 1. She lay still for a long time, staring at the ceiling beams, listening to the wind rattle the shutters. Her hands were tucked under the blanket, clenched into fists so tight her nails bit into her palms. She had not slept. She had lain awake all night, listening for screams that never came, listening for the sound of chains rattling, listening for her daughter's voice calling for her. But there had been nothing, only the wind. Katrina sat up slowly, her body stiff and cold despite the layers of wool. Her breath misted in the air. The fire had died hours ago, and she hadn't bothered to relight it. She rose, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders, and moved to the door. Her hand hovered over the latch. She told herself she was only checking, making sure it was done, making sure the decision she had made, the terrible, necessary decision, had been carried out by the cold or the beasts or the goddess herself. She told herself it was mercy. Better a quick death in the snow than the slow torture the pack would inflict if they decided the cursed child needed to be dealt with properly. The elders had been circling for months, their whispers growing louder, their gazes harder. They had started talking about purification rituals, about fire. Katrina had seen what they did to witches. This was kinder. This was mercy. She repeated it to herself like a prayer as she lifted the latch and stepped outside. The snow crunched under her boots. The air was sharp and biting. She kept her eyes forward, her jaw set, her breathing steady. She would look. She would confirm. And then she would go back inside and never speak of it again. But when she finally turned toward the tree where she had chained her daughter, the chains lay broken in the snow, empty. Katrina's breath stopped. She stepped closer, her heart pounding, her hands shaking. No blood, no body, no torn fabric or scattered bones. Just the chains, snapped clean through, and a set of massive paw prints leading into the forest. Prints far too large to belong to any normal wolf. Katrina's knees buckled. She caught herself against the tree, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. Gone. The word echoed in her mind, hollow and terrible. She should have felt relief, should have felt the weight lift from her shoulders. But instead, she felt something cold and sharp settle deep in her chest, coiling around her ribs like iron. Guilt. She stood there for a long time, staring at the empty chains, the snow falling softly around her. And then she turned and walked back inside. She did not tell the pack. She did not search. When her sister Moira came by that afternoon and asked where Isla was, Katrina looked her in the eye and said only, "She's gone." Moira frowned. "Gone where?" "Gone," Katrina repeated, her voice flat. "She ran off in the night, into the forest, into the—" Moira's eyes widened. "Katrina, you have to tell the Alpha. We need to send a search party." "No." "What?" Katrina turned away, her hands gripping the edge of the table. She made her choice. Let her go. Moira stared at her sister, confusion and horror warring on her face. "Katrina, what did you do?" But Katrina said nothing. And Moira, reading the silence, backed slowly toward the door and left without another word. Isla's POV. The beast led her through the forest for what felt like hours. Isla stumbled constantly, her legs weak, her body still shaking from the cold that had seeped into her bones. Her feet were bare, her dress soaked through, and every step sent jolts of pain up her legs. But every time she fell, the beast stopped. It never looked back, never came closer. It simply waited until she stood again, and somehow that was enough. It believed she could continue, and so she did. The forest was silent around them, the snow muffling every sound. The trees grew taller here, older, their trunks thick and gnarled, their branches heavy with ice. The path, if it could be called a path, wound upward, deeper into the mountains, away from everything Isla had ever known. She had no idea where they were going. She didn't care. Anywhere was better than where she'd been. By midday, they reached a place Isla had never seen, a hidden glen, sheltered on all sides by towering cliffs and ancient pines. A stream ran through the center, clear and cold, its surface steaming faintly in the frigid air. The wind didn't reach here. The snow fell softer. The air was warmer, as if the place itself were protected by something unseen. The beast stopped at the water's edge and lay down, its massive body sinking into the snow with a soft exhale. Isla collapsed a few feet away, gasping, her vision swimming. For a long time, neither of them moved. Then the beast shifted. Isla's breath caught as she watched its form begin to change, bones cracking, fur receding, limbs lengthening and reshaping. The sound was terrible and beautiful all at once, like a storm breaking over the mountains. And when it was done, a man knelt where the beast had been. Isla scrambled back, her heart pounding. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his body marked with scars that looked like claw marks carved deep into his skin. His hair was black and wild, falling past his shoulders. His eyes were still that molten gold, burning with the same intensity. He didn't speak. He simply looked at her, and in his gaze, Isla saw the same thing she had seen in the beast. Recognition, sorrow, understanding. "Who are you?" she whispered. His voice was rough, low, like gravel scraping stone. "Callum, why did you save me?" His jaw tightened. His gaze dropped to the snow between them. "Because I know what it is to be left for dead." Isla's breath hitched. Callum rose slowly, moving to a leather pack hidden beneath the roots of a massive pine. He pulled out a cloak, thick, lined with fur, and held it out to her without a word. "You'll freeze if you stay like that." Isla took it with shaking hands, wrapping it around herself. It was warm. It smelled like him, pine and smoke and something wild. "They'll come looking for me," she said quietly. Callum's expression darkened. "No," he said, "they won't." And somehow, Isla knew he was right. Callum's POV, he hadn't meant to save her. Callum had been hunting when he'd caught her scent on the wind. Fear and cold and something else. Something that made his wolf snarl and pace inside his chest. He'd tried to ignore it, tried to keep moving. He had learned long ago not to get involved in pack business, but the scent had pulled at him. And when he'd seen her, small, shivering, chained like an animal left for slaughter, something inside him had cracked. He knew that look. The hollow resignation in her eyes, the way she didn't even struggle. He'd worn that same look once, 15 years ago, when his own pack had dragged him to the edge of their territory and told him never to return. He'd been accused of killing the Alpha's son in a challenge. It had been an accident, a miscalculation during training, a moment of lost control. But the pack didn't care about accidents. They cared about blame, and Callum had been convenient, young, orphaned, expendable. They'd stripped him of his name, his rank, his family. They'd beaten him until he couldn't stand, and then they'd driven him into the mountains with nothing but the clothes on his back, and the knowledge that if he ever returned they would kill him. He'd been 15. He should have died, but he hadn't. He'd survived, adapted, become something else, something the packs now feared. Embiced Dorcha, the dark beast. He'd stopped being Callum a long time ago. But looking at this girl, this small, broken thing who had been abandoned the same way he had, he remembered. Isla's POV days passed in the hidden glen. Callum didn't speak much. He showed her where to find dry wood, how to build a fire that wouldn't smoke, how to set snares for rabbits and fish in the cold stream. He taught her which plants were safe to eat, and which would kill her. He was patient, careful, as if he were afraid of scaring her. Isla watched him when he wasn't looking. She saw the way his hands trembled sometimes when he thought she wasn't paying attention, the way he stared at the mountains in the distance, his jaw tight, his eyes haunted. She wondered what he had lost. One night, as they sat by the fire, she finally asked, "Why do they call you the Dark Beast?" Callum didn't look at her. He was sharpening a knife, the blade catching the firelight. "Because that's what I became. By choice?" His hands stilled. His gaze flicked to hers, sharp. "Does it matter?" Isla held his stare. "Yes." For a long moment he said nothing. Then quietly, "No, not by choice." Isla nodded slowly. "Then we're the same." Callum's expression shifted, surprise flickering across his face before he could hide it. And for the first time since he'd found her, he almost smiled. "Maybe," he said, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. That night, as Isla slept wrapped in furs by the fire, Callum stood at the edge of the glen, staring toward Glen Morwen. He could smell them on the wind. Wolves. Hunting. Not for her. For him. Isla's POV. She woke to the sound of howls. Distant, but growing closer. Isla sat up, heart pounding, her breath misting in the cold air. Callum was already at the edge of the glen, his body tense. Every muscle coiled like a spring about to snap. His eyes were fixed on the forest. "What is it?" she whispered. "Your pack." Isla's blood turned to ice. Why? He turned to look at her, and for the first time, she saw fear in his eyes. "Because they know you're alive, and they know you're with me. But I didn't. Doesn't matter." His voice was hard. "They'll say you did. They'll say I took you, corrupted you, and they'll kill us both for it." Isla's hands trembled. "Then we run." "I'm done running." "Callum, there's a cave, 2 miles north, following the stream. Go. Wait for me there. I'm not leaving you." "Isla, I'm not." His jaw clenched, his hands balled into fists, and then the first wolf broke through the tree line. It was massive, gray and scarred, its eyes cold and calculating. Glen Morwen's beta, Struan MacLeod. Behind him, A dozen others. Callum shifted instantly, bones cracking, fur erupting, his form growing until he towered over even the beta. Struan snarled, lips pulling back from teeth. "Stand down, beast. The girl comes with us. The Alpha wants her. Alive." Callum's growl shook the air. "No. Then you die." Struan lunged, and the forest exploded into violence. Callum's POV, he had fought packs before, had survived challenges, ambushes, territorial disputes. But this was different. This time, he had something to protect. He tore through them with a fury he hadn't felt in years, claws ripping through fur and flesh, jaws snapping, his body a weapon honed by years of survival. But there were too many. They surrounded him, dragging him down, teeth sinking into his shoulders, his legs, his throat. He heard Isla scream, felt blood pouring hot down his sides, and then light, blinding, pure, white as fresh snow. The wolves yelped, scattering like leaves in a storm. Callum collapsed, gasping, his vision swimming, and when he looked up, Isla stood in the center of the glen. Her eyes were glowing, silver, like the moon itself. Her body trembled, her hands raised, fingers splayed, and around her, the air shimmered with raw power. Struan stared, frozen, his ears flat against his skull. "Impossible," he breathed. Isla's voice rang out, steady, cold, nothing like the broken child who had knelt in the snow. "Leave." The beta hesitated. "The Alpha will leave. Now." Something in her voice, something ancient and absolute, made every wolf in the glen drop their gaze. One by one, they turned and fled. Callum shifted back, collapsing into the snow, his body broken and bleeding. Isla ran to him, dropping to her knees, her hands shaking as she pressed them to his wounds. "Callum, what?" His voice was barely a rasp. "What are you?" Isla looked down at her hands, still glowing, still trembling with power she didn't understand. "I don't know." But deep inside, something whispered, "You were never cursed. You were chosen." The goddess had been watching, and she had decided it was time. Isla's POV, she didn't remember closing her eyes. One moment she was kneeling beside Callum, his blood warm and slick on her hands, his breathing shallow and labored. The next, she was standing, but not in the glen. The world around her had changed completely. The air shimmered silver, thick and luminous, like she was standing inside a star. The ground beneath her feet was smooth as polished glass, reflecting a sky filled with constellations that moved and pulsed like living things. There were no trees here, no mountains, no cold, only light. And in the distance, a figure, tall, radiant, wrapped in robes that seemed woven from moonlight itself, flowing and shifting as if caught in an invisible wind. Isla's breath caught in her throat. The figure turned. Her face was ageless, neither young nor old, beautiful in a way that made Isla's chest ache. Her eyes were the color of winter storms, deep and endless. Her presence filled the space like gravity, like the pull of the tide. Isla. The voice was everywhere, inside her chest, inside her bones, inside her very soul. Isla dropped to her knees, trembling. "Are you the moon goddess?" The woman stepped closer, her light washing over Isla like warm water, like forgiveness. "I am." Isla's throat tightened. "Am I dead?" The goddess smiled, soft, sad, infinitely kind. "No, child. You are awake. I don't understand." The goddess knelt before her, and Isla felt the weight of eternity in her gaze. "You were never cursed, Isla. You were marked. Chosen before you were born to carry something your pack could not comprehend." "What?" "Power, truth, the ability to see what others refuse to see." Isla's hand shook. "But I'm nothing. I'm weak. I don't even have a wolf." The goddess reached out, pressing a hand to Isla's chest. Warmth flooded through her, fierce, wild, unstoppable, and deep inside something stirred. A growl, low, steady, powerful. Isla gasped, her eyes wide. "You have always had a wolf, Isla," the goddess whispered. She was simply waiting. For what? For you to stop believing what they told you. Tears burned in Isla's eyes, spilling hot down her cheeks. The goddess smiled. "She is strong, ancient. She has protected you all these years, hidden, silent, waiting for the moment you would be ready to rise." Isla felt it now, the presence inside her. Not foreign, not separate. Hers. What is her name?" The goddess's smile deepened. "Ask her yourself." Isla closed her eyes, and in the silence, a voice answered. deep, feminine, fierce. Moira, I am Moira, and I have always been yours. Isla's POV. When Isla opened her eyes, she was back in the glen, but everything had changed. The world was sharper, brighter. She could hear the heartbeat of the stream, the whisper of snow falling on pine branches, the distant call of an eagle miles away. She could smell everything, the blood on Callum's skin, the fierce scent the wolves had left behind, the deep, earthy smell of the forest itself, and beneath it all, she could smell him, pine and smoke, and something wild and ancient, something that made Moira stir inside her chest. Mate. Isla's breath hitched. Callum lay a few feet away, unconscious but alive. His wounds had already begun to heal, his chest rising and falling steadily. She crawled to him, her body still trembling from the awakening, and pressed a hand to his chest. "Callum," she whispered. His eyes opened slowly, gold and exhausted and beautiful. "Isla, I'm here." He stared at her, and something shifted in his expression. Shock. Awe. "Your eyes." Isla blinked. "What about them?" "They're silver." She touched her face, still feeling the warmth of the goddess's power lingering there. Callum sat up slowly, wincing. "What happened?" "I saw her. The moon goddess. She told me I was never cursed, that I was chosen." Callum's jaw tightened. "Chosen for what?" "I don't know yet." But Moira's voice rumbled inside her, low and certain. "To judge them, to bring justice, to make them see." Callum's POV. He had lived long enough to recognize power when he saw it. And the girl sitting before him now, she was no longer a girl. She was something else, something dangerous, something divine. And the bond between them, it burned. Callum had never felt a mate bond before. He'd been cast out too young, too broken, had spent too many years alone to ever hope for one. But now it was there, undeniable, a golden thread connecting his soul to hers, pulling at him like a chain made of starlight and fire. He wanted to reach for her, wanted to pull her close and never let go, but he didn't deserve her, not after what he'd become. Isla was watching him, her silver eyes searching his face. "You feel it too," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. Callum looked away, his jaw tight. "It doesn't matter." "Why not?" "Because you're meant for something greater than this, than me." Isla's expression hardened, her eyes flashing. Don't what?" "Don't decide what I'm meant for." Callum's chest ached. She was right, and she was terrifying, and he was completely, helplessly in love with her. Isla's POV. 3 weeks passed in the hidden glen, and Isla was no longer the girl who had been chained in the snow. Every morning, she woke before dawn, her body aching but stronger than it had been the day before. Callum would already be awake, sitting by the fire, sharpening weapons or preparing food. He never said much, but his presence was steady, grounding, and every morning, Moira stirred inside her, eager, restless. Run. So Isla ran. At first, she could barely make it 100 yards before her lungs burned and her legs gave out. But Moira pushed her, whispered encouragement, shared her strength. And slowly, Isla grew faster, stronger. She learned to shift. Though the first time had been agony, her bones had cracked and reformed, her skin had burned, and she had screamed until her voice was raw. Callum had held her afterward, his hands gentle, his voice low and soothing. "It gets easier," he'd promised, and it had. Now when she shifted, it was fluid, natural. Her wolf form was massive, larger than any Omega had a right to be, her fur silver as moonlight, her eyes glowing with the goddess's mark. Moira was magnificent, fierce and protective and utterly unafraid. Everything Isla had never been allowed to be. Callum taught her to hunt, to track, to fight. He was patient but demanding, never letting her quit even when exhaustion made her limbs shake. "Again," he would say, circling her as she struggled to hold her stance. "I can't. You can. Again." And she would, because somewhere deep inside, she knew he was right. She could. One afternoon, as the sun filtered weakly through the clouds, Callum stood across from her in the clearing, his stance relaxed but ready. "Attack me," he said. Isla hesitated. "What?" "You heard me. Attack. I don't want to hurt you." His mouth quirked in something that might have been a smile. "You won't." Isla's eyes narrowed. Moira rumbled inside her, rising to the challenge. "Show him." She shifted mid-leap, her body transforming as she launched herself at Callum. He shifted just as fast, meeting her in the air. They collided in a tangle of fur and claws, rolling through the snow. Isla fought with everything she had, teeth snapping, claws raking, her body twisting and striking. But Callum was faster, stronger, more experienced. He pinned her in seconds, his jaws at her throat, his weight holding her down. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Callum shifted back, breathing hard, his eyes still that molten gold. "Better," he said, offering her a hand. "But you're still thinking too much. Let Moira lead." Isla shifted back, accepting his hand, her chest heaving. "She wants to win. So do you." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the air between them crackled with something more than just training, something neither of them was ready to name. Callum's POV watching her grow into her power was both beautiful and terrifying. Every day she became more confident, more dangerous, and every day the mate bond pulled tighter until Callum could barely think of anything else. He tried to keep his distance, tried to be nothing more than a teacher, a protector, but it was getting harder, especially when she looked at him the way she was looking at him now, silver eyes bright, her breathing still heavy from the fight, her hair wild around her face. She was beautiful, and she was his, except she wasn't. She deserved better than a broken exile with blood on his hands and ghosts in his past. "Callum," he blinked, realizing he'd been staring. "What?" "You were growling." He cleared his throat, looking away. "Was I?" "Yes." She stepped closer, and he could smell her. Pine and snow and something uniquely her. "Why?" "No reason." "Liar." His jaw tightened. Isla reached out, her fingers brushing his arm. The bond flared like fire. Callum jerked back, his breathing uneven. "Don't." "Why not?" "Because I can't." He stopped, his hands clenching into fists. "You don't know what you're asking." "Then tell me." He met her eyes, and the words came out before he could stop them. "You're my mate, Isla. The bond. I feel it every second, and it's killing me, because you deserve someone whole, someone who hasn't spent the last 15 years becoming a monster." Isla's expression softened. "You're not a monster. You don't know what I've done. I know you saved me. I know you've been patient and kind and—" "Stop." "No." She stepped closer, refusing to back down. "You don't get to decide what I deserve. That's my choice." Callum stared at her, his heart pounding, and then, slowly, carefully, he reached out and cupped her face in his hands. "You're going to break me," he whispered. Isla smiled, small and fierce and utterly fearless. "Good." Isla's POV that night, as they sat by the fire, Isla made her decision. "I have to go back." Callum's head snapped up. "What?" "To Glen Morwen. I have to face them. Isla, they tried to kill me, Callum. My own mother chained me in the snow and left me to die, and the pack let it happen. They wanted it to happen. And you want revenge." "No." She met his eyes. "I want justice. There's a difference." Callum was silent for a long moment. "They'll try to kill you again. Let them try." He stood, pacing, his movements restless. "You don't understand what you're asking. The pack, they won't just accept you back. They'll see you as a threat, an abomination." "I know. Then why?" Isla stood as well, her voice steady. "Because if I don't face them, I'll spend the rest of my life running. And I'm done running." Callum stopped, his back to her, his shoulders tense. "I can't lose you. You won't. You don't know that." Isla crossed to him, placing a hand on his arm. "I have Moira now. I have the goddess's blessing. And I have you." Callum turned, his eyes blazing. "If you go back, I go with you." "Callum, no arguments. If you're walking into danger, I'm there." Isla's throat tightened. "Thank you." He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "Don't thank me yet." Isla's POV. They reached the edge of Glen Morwen territory 3 days later, just as the sun was setting. The village looked exactly as Isla remembered. Small, huddled against the mountainside, smoke rising from chimneys, the sound of voices carrying on the wind. But now, it felt different, smaller, less powerful. She was no longer the frightened child they had discarded. Callum stood beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. "Last chance to turn back," he said quietly. Isla shook her head. "No, I need to do this." She stepped forward, and the wolves on patrol caught her scent immediately. Within minutes, they were surrounded. A dozen wolves, all shifted, all snarling. But Isla didn't flinch. She simply stood there, chin lifted, eyes glowing silver. "I am Isla Ross," she said clearly, "daughter of Glen Morwen. And I have returned." The wolves stared, shock rippling through them. One of them, a young male Isla vaguely recognized, shifted back, Impossible. You're dead. Clearly not. The Alpha needs to see this. Good, Isla said calmly. Take me to him. Callum's POV. They were escorted through the village like prisoners. Callum could feel the eyes on them. Curious, hostile, afraid. Whispers followed them like shadows. The cursed one. The dark beast. What are they doing here? Isla walked with her head high, her expression calm. She was magnificent, and Callum had never been more terrified. They were led to the center of the village, where a crowd was already gathering, and in the center of that crowd stood Isla's mother. Isla's POV Catriona Ross looked older than Isla remembered. Her face was lined with exhaustion, her hair graying at the temples, her eyes hollow. When she saw Isla, she froze. Her lips parted, her hands trembled. Isla. Isla said nothing. The crowd parted, and Alpha Gregor MacLeod stepped forward. He was old, gray-muzzled, his body still strong but beginning to show the weight of years. His eyes were sharp, calculating. Isla Ross, he said slowly. We thought you dead. I'm sure you did. His gaze flicked to Callum, and his lip curled. And you brought the beast with you. How fitting. His name is Callum, Isla said coldly, and he saved my life when my own pack left me to die. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Gregor's expression didn't change. You were a danger to the pack. Cursed from birth. Your presence brought nothing but misfortune. No. Isla stepped forward, her voice ringing clear. My presence brought nothing but blame. You needed someone to punish for your failures, and I was convenient. You dare, I dare. Her eyes flared silver. Because I am not the broken child you discarded. I am blessed by the moon goddess herself. And I have returned to demand justice. Gregor's eyes narrowed. Justice or revenge? Justice, Isla repeated firmly. For myself, and for every other wolf you've cast out because they didn't fit your idea of strength. The crowd was silent now, hanging on every word. Gregor studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. Cold and dangerous. Very well. You want justice? Then prove you deserve it. Challenge me. Isla's heart pounded. What? You heard me. Challenge me for leadership. If you win, the pack is yours. If you lose, he shrugged. You won't survive to complain. Callum growled low, stepping forward, but Isla placed a hand on his chest, stopping him. I accept, she said clearly. The crowd erupted, and Gregor's smile widened. Tomorrow at dawn. The old way. To submission or death. Isla nodded. Tomorrow. Isla's POV. That night, Isla couldn't sleep. She lay in the small room they'd been given, barely more than a shed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. Callum sat in the corner, his eyes never leaving her. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. Yes, I do. He's going to try to kill you. I know. Isla, I'm not backing down, Callum. She sat up, meeting his eyes. This is bigger than me. Bigger than revenge. If I don't stand up to him, nothing changes. The pack will keep sacrificing the weak, keep blaming the innocent. Callum's jaw tightened. Then let me fight him. No, this is my fight. You could die. So could you. She crossed to him, kneeling in front of him. But I won't, because I have something he doesn't. What? The truth, and the goddess's blessing. And you. Callum pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her. If anything happens to you, it won't. Promise me. I promise. But even as she said it, she could feel Moira's uncertainty. This would not be an easy fight. Dawn came cold and gray. The entire pack gathered in the clearing at the center of the village, a wide open space surrounded by ancient stones. Isla stood on one side, stripped down to a simple shift, her silver eyes glowing. Gregor stood on the other, already shifted, his massive gray wolf snarling. The rules were simple. Fight until one submitted, or died. Callum stood at the edge of the circle, every muscle in his body tense. An elder stepped forward, old Murdoch, the one who had called her cursed. Begin, he said. Gregor lunged. Isla shifted mid-leap, her silver wolf meeting him in the air. They collided with bone-shaking force, claws and teeth flashing. Gregor was experienced, brutal, using his weight and strength to try to pin her. But Isla was faster. She twisted, raking her claws across his shoulder, drawing first blood. The crowd gasped. Gregor snarled, spinning, his jaws snapping inches from her throat. They circled each other, breathing hard. He's strong, Moira warned. But he's old, tired. Use that. Isla feinted left, then darted right, her teeth sinking into his flank. Gregor howled, throwing her off. They clashed again and again, blood staining the snow, both refusing to yield. And then Gregor made a mistake. He lunged too far, overextended. Isla saw it. She ducked under his attack and struck, her jaws clamping down on his throat. Not hard enough to kill, but hard enough to win. Gregor froze. The crowd held its breath. Isla held him there for 3 long seconds. Then she released him, stepped back, shifted, stood there, breathing hard, blood on her lips, her eyes blazing silver. "Yield," she said. Gregor shifted back, gasping, his hand at his throat. For a long moment, he stared at her. Then slowly, he bowed his head. "I yield." The crowd erupted. Isla turned to face them, her voice ringing clear. "I am Isla Ross, daughter of Glen Morwen, blessed by the moon goddess, and I am your new alpha." Isla's POV. The pack gathered in the Great Hall that evening. Every wolf, young and old, packed into the stone building. Isla stood at the front, Callum at her side. She was still covered in blood and bruises, but she stood tall. "I did not return for revenge," she said, her voice carrying. "I returned for justice, and for change." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. For too long this pack has survived by casting out the weak, by blaming the innocent, by deciding that some lives matter less than others. She looked directly at Murdoch. "You called me cursed. You told my mother I was a burden that needed to be removed." Murdoch's face paled. "That ends now," Isla continued. "From this day forward, no wolf will be cast out for being different. No child will be blamed for tragedies beyond their control, and no one will be left to die in the snow." The crowd was silent. Then, from the back, a voice spoke. "And what of those who wronged you?" Isla turned. Her mother stood there, trembling, tears streaming down her face. The crowd parted. Katrina stepped forward, her voice breaking. "What I did, there are no words. I thought I was protecting you. I thought—" She stopped, shaking her head. "I was wrong. I was a coward. And I will carry that shame for the rest of my life." Isla stared at her mother, the woman who had chained her, abandoned her, left her to die. She felt Moira stir. "What do we do?" Isla thought of the goddess's words, chosen to bring truth, justice, healing. She stepped forward. "You broke me," she said quietly. "You took everything from me. My childhood, my safety, my trust." Katrina sobbed. "But you also gave me something you didn't intend." Her mother looked up, confused. "You gave me the chance to become who I was meant to be." Isla reached out, placing a hand on her mother's shoulder. "I forgive you." Katrina collapsed, weeping. And the pack, slowly, hesitantly, began to kneel. Callum's POV months passed. Glen Morwen changed under Isla's leadership. The weak were protected, the outcasts welcomed, the old cruel traditions dismantled, and Callum stood beside her through all of it, not as a shadow, not as a beast, but as her mate, her equal. One night, as they stood together at the edge of the village, looking out over the mountains, Isla leaned against him. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Saving me?" Callum smiled, real and genuine. "Never, even though it brought you back here, to the place that hurt you." He turned to her, cupping her face. "You didn't bring me back. You brought me home." Isla's eyes shimmered. "I love you. I love you too." He kissed her, soft and slow, under the light of the full moon, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, not in mourning, but in celebration. Isla's POV. The young Omega stood at the edge of the village, shivering, her eyes wide with fear. She had been cast out by a neighboring pack, accused of bringing bad luck. Isla recognized that look. She knelt before the girl, gentle and patient. "What's your name?" "Fiona," the girl whispered. "Fiona, I need you to listen to me very carefully." Isla's silver eyes glowed softly. "You are not cursed. You are not broken. You are exactly who the goddess meant you to be." The girl's lip trembled. "How do you know?" Isla smiled. "Because I was you." She offered her hand. "Welcome to Glen Morwen. You're safe now." Fiona took her hand, tears streaming down her face. And behind Isla, Callum stood with their daughter, a small silver-eyed girl who watched everything with fierce curiosity. The pack had been reborn, and so had they.